Lucas and Katy had been married for 4 years. From the outside, their relationship seemed almost perfect. A beautiful wife who loves and holds onto her husband immensely, and a husband, a charming man with an attractive appearance, taking care of his beloved. But few would have guessed that their family had experienced not the brightest of times. 6 months had passed since those events, but the consequences of that period were still being felt. It all started when the couple decided to go to the movies one weekend. Before the wedding, movie dates had been something of a tradition for Lucas and Katy. But then life and work began to take over everything. After watching a good comedy, the couple waited for the credits to come on the screen and headed for the exit. They left the theater in high spirits, discussing the plot in passing, and then stopped at the posters of other new releases hanging on the wall. As the couple were excitedly deciding what they wouldn't see next, some woman approached them from behind and excitedly screamed, "Katy, is that you?" Katy turned around abruptly and recognized the woman. It was Annie, her former classmate. Surprised, Katy noticed that Annie still hadn't changed her habits since high school. She still brightly colored her plump lips and wore exclusively revealing clothes that also emphasized her slender figure. They weren't really friends at school. Annie always tried to be on everyone's radar, dating the most popular guys and spending evenings in clubs with her friends. Katy was the opposite of Annie in personality and hobbies, so they were of no interest to each other. But the past remains in the past, and Katy put on her mask of politeness, determined to keep the conversation on a positive note. Except that soon enough the real reason for Annie's sudden appearance became clear. She kept glancing in Lucas's direction with interest, mockingly fixing her hair. After Katy introduced her husband to her classmate, she jumped at the chance to ask about him. She began to ask him how long she and Katy had been in a relationship, where he worked, and what he was interested in. At one point, the wife felt superfluous. The moon finally soared when she noticed that Lucas had been staring at Annie's cleavage for a long time, and there was a devilish light in his eyes. "Honey, we have to go now. Annie will see you another time." Katy muttered irritably and tugged at her husband's arm. "Oh, of course. It was nice to meet you, Lucas," the woman said playfully and accompanied them with a hard stare. About a month after this sudden meeting, the wife began to sense that something was wrong with her husband. No, he was still sleeping at home and talking to her as if nothing had happened, but there was much less intimacy between them than before. And Lucas was temperamental by nature. And one day, Katy realized the reason for this change. When her husband went to take a shower, Katy saw that he had received a message on the phone that he had left on the bed. Curiosity got the better of her, and the woman, cautiously looking at the bathroom door, opened the message with a file attached. It was a picture of a naked Annie, followed by a message, "Already bored." There could be no mistake. It was not a prank on the part of the former classmate, because before that there was also correspondence between them, in which they agreed on the place and time of meetings. After that, the woman did a real interrogation as hard as she could, trying not to fall into hysterics, to which she was already close, but her husband only shrugged his shoulders and asked in surprise, "And we are not in an open relationship?" From this turn of the woman just stunned. Whether it was a defensive reaction from the man or he was speaking in earnest is unclear. "Actually, no," she answered, and her voice trembled. "Why would you even think that? All my previous relationships have been like this, I thought you knew," he said calmly. "But if you don't like it, fine. I'll try not to do it again," he added with pity in his voice as he watched his wife struggling to keep from bursting into tears. The man has since given Katy some semblance of an apology, which has not made her feel much better. Her mother, who was aware of everything that was going on in their family, also contributed. She began to convince her daughter that once doesn't count. "You have to be wise and forgive Lucas for this mistake. You saw for yourself what a handsome man you were marrying, of course. Everyone would hang on him. That's what got you and him originally," she told me herself, her mother said. Katy knew there was truth in those words. And her husband-to-be, when they first started hanging out, was always the center of attention. Women flirted with him, and it was as if he responded on purpose with mild indifference, as if he understood that this would further fuel their interest in him. Katy was unspeakably pleased when he turned his attention to her, and from there she had already done everything in her power to keep them together. But after what Lucas had done now, something broke inside her. She tried to forget what had happened and move on. But every now and then she thought back to his cheating and that astonished phrase about an open relationship. 6 months later, they no longer remembered that incident with Katy's classmate, or at least did not mention it out loud. One Friday, when Katy came home from work, she saw an unfamiliar pair of men's shoes in the hallway, and then she heard cheering and laughter from the kitchen. The woman walked into the apartment and found Lucas along with his best friend, Gleb, actively singing a bottle of hot liquor. "Oh, Katy, you're back," said her husband happily. "And here you're washing Gleb's new car." "Hello, Katy." Suddenly, Lucas smiled amiably. Unexpectedly for herself, the woman blushed. She had known Gleb for a long time, but somehow now she looked at him differently. She had never thought to look at anyone other than her husband with such interest before, but a lot had changed since then. Now she saw Lucas's best friend as a very attractive and pleasant man. After greeting both of them and talking a little on general topics, she retired to another room to recover a little from the sudden idea that had occurred to her. About a week later, Lucas informed her that he would have to go to another city for a while for work. He always gave exact dates and was extremely punctual. Katy immediately worked out in her head how and when she should start executing her plan and had already made up her mind. The day after Lucas left, she texted her husband's best friend to meet her at a bar tonight. Allegedly, Lucas asked her to make an appointment because he wanted to have a threesome. Gleb quickly responded and agreed. At the appointed time, Katy, wearing her most playful dress, was already waiting for the man at a table. Gleb walked in, a little worried, but the sight of Katy distracted him a little. "Where is Lucas?" he asked. "Let's wait a while, maybe in a traffic jam where he's stuck." His companion smiled at him. Then she asked him why he was so tense, and he vaguely explained it was work problems. Then Katy immediately suggested that he not delay and order a drink to relax. After about 15 minutes, the woman pretended to be texting on the phone and then, trying to play it off as believably as possible, said, "Lucas had to leave for work." And a moment later she added, "Okay, now that we've met, let's at least have a drink together." The woman was charming and easygoing all evening, trying different tricks, trying to get Gleb to get him to drink heavily. As soon as he got all red-faced and started joking around about intimate topics, she knew he was ready. Katy volunteered to order a cab to 2 addresses, but she indicated only her own house. As they pulled up to their destination, she suddenly remembered that there was a problem with the lights at home, and Lucas had just promised to get them fixed today. She begged Gleb to come up and help her. "Can't you wait till morning?" The man chuckled. "No, come on." Disarming, she smiled and dragged his hand to the exit. Already in the apartment, while Gleb was examining quite working switch, Katy came up to him with 2 shot glasses in his hands. "Here, try it. It will blow your mind," she said, handing him the drink. One thing led to another, and the fun was over. The woman turned on the music and gestured to Gleb to dance with her. The man was already completely relaxed by this point. Then she embraced him and pressed her cheek to his face. Gleb did not resist. When her palm began to go down his torso lower and lower, he suddenly remembered with whom he was. And weakly he tried to stop her. But her hands were already doing things that he quickly lost his temper. They spent the rest of the evening in the marital bedroom. And after everything, Gleb fell asleep peacefully. Katy timed everything. Gleb slept soundly, and Lucas was due back early in the morning. And so it happened. When he walked into the bedroom, he initially just froze in surprise. Katy was already awake and looking at her husband with a sneer. "You said yourself that we have an open relationship," she said, and smiled faintly. "What are you talking about?" The husband said curtly, beginning to realize what he had just witnessed. At that moment, Gleb began to wake up. Waking up was not pleasant. Not only had he been drunk in pain last night, his head ached, but Lucas, who had flown up to him, had not cared for his comfort. "What are you doing here, Gleb?" The landlord bellowed, and all that came out of his mouth was profanity. Lucas was not in the habit of fighting, but this time he could hardly keep his hands off him. He knew it was a revenge play for the betrayal, and with Katy it was clear. It seemed that it was Gleb that the man was most angry with. No matter how much your friend's wife hangs on you, you shouldn't fall for it. It was already on his conscience. Once he could not resist and went to bed with Katy. The wife packed her bags that same day and moved in with her sister. She was pleased with herself. There was not an ounce of regret on her face for what she had done. She wanted to prick Lucas more, and she did. She knew that betrayal by his wife and best friend at the same time could not be tolerated by everyone, even a self-confident man like Lucas. The couple divorced, and communication between friends was never restored. In a way, Lucas was glad it had worked out that way. Now he was free again, which meant that no one would reproach him for infidelity. He realized that he wasn't ready for married life yet, or he was, but not the way he had been with his ex-wife. One way or another, everyone got their way, even though they had to set the other person up to do it. The next story is no less interesting. The story is about how his wife went to the workshop. Then he decided to go to see her, and what he saw there shocked him and changed his whole life. Arnold and Olivia had been together for 7 years. They met at a wedding of mutual friends where they were both invited. A shared feast, jokes, and dancing brought them closer together. After the party, they continued to talk, and 2 years later, they walked down the aisle together. Everyone admired how well they looked together. And meanwhile, no one guessed what drama was going on in this relationship. The fact was that Arnold had cheated on his wife. It happened very stupid and banal. It was a corporate party. He and a colleague had a lot to drink, and it all happened on a drunken head right in the restaurant. Olivia found out almost immediately. Her husband's late arrival didn't alarm her, but his behavior did. He avoided eye contact with her for fear she would guess. As soon as he sobered up a little and realized what he had done, he became very ashamed. He decided to tell her everything on the second day when the guilt finally got to him. He apologized seemingly 1,000 times while Olivia, furious, smashed plates in the kitchen. Then she just as swiftly packed her things and left for a friend's house. It was not until a week later that Arnold was able to contact her. Prior to that, his wife had not returned his calls or messages. Frankly, Olivia herself had missed her husband by this time. She was still very angry with him, but at the same time, the woman couldn't just dismiss all the good things that had happened between them. She was not ready to let him go completely, so they got back together. Arnold, who still felt guilty and tried to make it up to him, and Olivia, who had made an effort and said she was ready to forgive him. 6 months passed. From time to time, there was a thaw between them, and then a coldness that came after each of his wife's offenses. Once again, when Olivia was very upset with his spouse, he decided to placate her with a large gift. He bought her a car. Prior to that, they had only had one car in the family, and it had been used mostly by Arnold. He would leave for work before his wife, and she would take a cab to get there. Olivia had wanted a miniature car for a long time, but had always been afraid of the money to buy one. So Arnold made a move first. On their shared day off, he took his wife outside and handed her the keys to her dream. Olivia rejoiced like a child. She jumped around in one place, then ran around the car and kept asking back, "Is it really for me?" Arnold was very pleased. He was sure that this gift showed Olivia just how much he loved her and wanted to close the subject with her eternal resentments. At first it really worked. His wife walked around most of the time, happy, constantly talking about how much she liked her new car. The arguments between the couple stopped. The mood was too upbeat for any mutual grievances. But then, as is usually the case with anything new, you get used to it, and the feeling of euphoria wears off. One day, Olivia was very late getting home from work. Arnold had already had time to come home, heat up dinner, and eat alone. And she still wasn't there. Her husband didn't call her, because he knew that sometimes it was very rare for her to leave the office very last, finishing some kind of report. Finally, when she arrived, she began to lament right from the threshold about the faulty machine and how she had had to spend a good hour and a half in the shop until the mechanics could fix it. Her husband listened attentively and couldn't help but notice the change in his wife's expression as she recounted her dialogue with the mechanic. Her eyes were smiling, and at one point her cheeks were flushed. A week after this event, it was as if the wife had been replaced. She was suddenly very close to her friends, even though she had preferred the company of her husband or even solitude. Olivia began to constantly go to visit them, meet them, sit in cafes, and that was several times a week. Arnold didn't feel threatened by this change until one day. One day, Olivia was so late from a meeting with her girlfriends that her husband started calling her. He did it long and hard, but her spouse never picked up. He did this overtime and relentlessly, but she didn't pick up, and when she did, Olivia sounded like a man's voice in the background. Even Olivia herself sounded strangely playful in an unaccustomed way. When his wife went to bed, Arnold decided to look into her phone in case there was something suspicious, and he found it. Very often, an auto repair shop flashed among the calls. It was strange, because after that incident, his wife never said anything more about breakdowns. He wrote down the telephone number of the repair shop and decided to go there tomorrow. The next day at lunchtime, he drove to the repair shop where his wife had gone. As he drove up, Arnold noticed a vaguely familiar face. Among the mechanics was a tall man with a thick beard. After a couple of seconds, he remembered him. It was Gary. He was the man Olivia had left when Arnold began to pay attention to her and ask her out. Arnold had seen him in pictures of his wife on social media until she deleted them at the request of her future husband. The husband began to get angry. So that's why Olivia blushed when she told him about her visit to the workshop. She had met her ex-boyfriend here. Surely they got to talking and decided to meet to reminisce about old times. Why else had she changed so much since that incident? The husband got out of the car and headed toward his wife's ex. Gary, as if sensing the look on his face, turned to Arnold. Apparently recognizing him and considering his nervous state, the man began to smile cheekily. Arnold was brief and got right to the point. He asked why Gary was tangling under his and his wife's feet. Messing around. That's right. Guess who already? Said the mechanic and started laughing out loud. Arnold could not stand such insolence and got into a fight. They were quickly separated, but the husband managed to punch the insolent man a couple of times. Arnold rushed home at full speed. He was still sputtering about the altercation with his wife's lover. He understood why she had done it. Of course, she wanted revenge on him for that cheating at the corporate retreat. That was clear. All the apologies, remorse, and gifts weren't enough for her, and she decided to hit the hardest part, his jealousy and sense of possessiveness. He himself had suffered greatly from that situation, when by his own mistake, he might have lost his beloved wife. But now he knew for sure they had finally lost each other. After what had happened, there was not an ounce of love left between them. He didn't even remember how he had parked the car and set the alarm. He did all this on automatic, and the only thing on his mind was to throw the cheater out of the house now. Arnold quickly went up to his floor and jerked open the front door. The wife was already home and usually didn't lock herself in before her husband arrived. She was lying peacefully on the couch in the living room watching some show on TV, laughing. When the front door opened, she didn't even lift a finger. But after a few seconds, she had to look away from the show. Her husband towered over her and began shouting something loudly. The wife didn't admit to anything for a long time, but when her husband called her a woman of easy virtue, she exploded. "What? Is that what you're calling me? Who are you then? I'm not the one who started it." The husband heard everything he wanted to hear. He told his wife, in an orderly tone, to pack her things and get the hell out of his house. The woman did not argue. Hatred of her husband swept over her head, and she was only glad that he found out about the betrayal. And now it was all over between them. She had long wanted to prick him more painfully. The couple divorced as quickly as possible. Arnold felt nothing but disappointment. And why did he torment himself with guilt over his infidelity? He had done everything to make his wife forgive him, repented of what he had done, and she took her revenge on him, fully aware of her actions. And she did it more than once. He was glad that at least they had not had time to have children together. Otherwise, it would have been them who would have suffered in the end. Now Arnold was free, and he knew for a fact that he would do everything in his power to make sure this situation did not happen again. That's the story. Share in the comments what you think about this situation and the behavior of the characters. And thank you for listening to the story to the end. Have a nice day.